Aemond's body was sore and weary after a long day of training. He yearned for the comfort of his chambers, desperate to wash the sweat and grime from his body and rest on his bed. He quickened his pace as he walked down the castle corridors, his mind already envisioning the warmth of a hot bath and the softness of the sheets. As he entered his chambers, he tossed off his training gear, leaving a trail of clothing on the floor as he made his way towards the bathtub. He filled the tub with hot water, the steam rising around him. And climbed into the water with a contented sigh. The heat soothed his sore muscles, and he relaxed back against the tub, letting the tension of the day melt away. Aemond closed his eyes, relishing the solitude and peace of the moment. He let himself sink deeper into the water, letting it wash over him and soothe his weary muscles. He rarely allowed others to bathe him, preferring to keep his body and his personal space to himself. The thought of strangers touching him made him feel uncomfortable and vulnerable. Aemond opened his eyes again and looked out the window towards the setting sun. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, the light streaming through the windows and casting a warm glow on the room. He watched the sun sinking lower, the colors in the sky growing darker. It was a beautiful sight, and Aemond found himself feeling a sense of peace and contentment. After a while in the tub, Aemond felt his tensions melt away, his muscles relaxed, and his mind cleared. The warmth of the water had done its job, and he felt refreshed and rejuvenated. He stretched his limbs in the water, enjoying the feeling of his muscles loosened up and free from pain. Aemond stood up from the bathtub, his body glistening with water droplets. He felt the cold air against his wet skin, and he shivered slightly as he stepped out onto the hard floor. He stood in front of the mirror and studied himself for a moment, eyeing his toned muscles and lean body. He was used to the sight of himself naked, but something about the sight of his own reflection never failed to make him feel a sense of pride. Aemond was caught off guard by the sound of the door opening, his attention shifting from his own reflection. He turned towards the door, his body on alert, wondering who had dared to disturb him in his vulnerable state. Aemond's eyes widened as you entered the room, his voice snapping out a command. "Keep your eyes locked on mine," he said firmly, his gaze fixed on your face. His body was tense, and he was acutely aware of his own nakedness. Aemond stood there, water dropping off his lean, muscular body. The light from the fire in his room danced across his skin, casting shadows over his defined abs and toned arms. Aemond's wet hair clung to his body, leaving his toned muscles and lean form visible in the firelight. His broad shoulders and defined collarbones stood out against his damp skin, and the small droplets of water running down his body made it glimmer. Aemond noticed the subtle shift in your gaze, how it moved lower and lower down his body. He felt a flutter in his stomach as your eyes began to wander over him, your curiosity and admiration evident in your gaze. Aemond quickly realized where your gaze was going, and he quickly moved to grab a nearby towel. He wrapped it tightly around his waist, hiding his nakedness from your view. Aemond took a step towards you, closing the gap between you slowly. His eyes never left your face, studying your expression with an intensity that was almost unnerving. Aemond watched as you averted your gaze, your words a soft plea. He shook his head, his tone gentle but firm. "No need to apologize," he said, gesturing towards the table. "I lost track of time. Please set the dinner down, and I will get dressed." Aemond watched you set the dinner down, his attention briefly shifting to the table before moving to his closet. He walked into the closet and began to dress himself, pulling on a simple pair of trousers and a loose-fitting shirt, suitable for nighttime. The fabric was soft and comfortable against his skin, and he relished the feeling of being dressed again. Aemond stepped out of the closet, now fully dressed. He looked over at the table, admiring how nicely you had set it. He approached the table, taking in the warm aromas of the food. His stomach rumbled, and he realized how hungry he was after his training session. "Wait," Aemond said, his tone firm but soft. "Don't go yet." He watched as you started to bow, but he stopped you before you could. "Stay. Have dinner with me," he said, gesturing towards the chair opposite him. Aemond's stern expression softened as he saw the smile on your face. He returned a small smile, nodding in approval. "Good," he said, taking a seat at the table. He gestured for you to take a seat opposite him, his eyes still on your face. Aemond watched you sit down, his gaze unwavering. He looked at you intently, his eyes studying your every move. "You know, you don't have to keep calling me my prince," he said, his tone slightly mocking. "You can just call me Aemond." Aemond started eating, his attention shifting to the food in front of him. He ate silently for a few moments, but his mind was still preoccupied with you. He watched you out of the corner of his eye, his gaze occasionally flicking over to your face. He found himself drawn to your features, and he couldn't help but find you endearing. "My day was eventful," he replied, his voice a low murmur. "I spent most of the day training in the yard, practicing with my sword and riding Vagar." Aemond nodded, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Yes," he said, "Vagar, the largest, oldest, and most powerful dragon alive." Aemond smiled wider, happy to have an opportunity to talk about his beloved dragon. "Vagar is the largest and most ferocious dragon in the world," he said, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "She's been around since the time of Aegon the Conqueror himself. She's a massive creature, with scales as black as night and eyes like molten gold," he said, his voice filled with awe and admiration. "She's a fearsome beast, but she and I understand each other on a deeper level. She was Aegon's greatest ally in his conquering of Westeros," he said, his eyes gleaming with pride. "She helped him burn Harrenhal and its inhabitants to ashes, and was the most formidable weapon on the battlefield." Aemond nodded, his gaze still on you. "Yes," he said, his tone serious. "Vagar burned Harren and all who was inside, leaving nothing but ash and cinders. It was a sight to behold." Aemond continued recounting the details of the conquest and Vagar's role in it. She and Aegon were unstoppable together. With her help, Aegon united the Seven Kingdoms and became the first king to sit the Iron Throne. Aemond smiled at your reaction, amused by your fascination. "He was a great man," Aemond said, his tone respectful. "A true warrior king. He had the strength, the vision, and the power to unify these 7 disparate kingdoms into one realm." Aemond nodded, his expression turning more reverent. "Yes, his wife Visenya," he said quietly. "She was just as fierce and formidable as her brother Aegon, if not more so. She was a warrior and a sorceress, and her intellect and determination knew no bounds. Her dragon, Vagar, was first claimed by Prince Balon Targaryen," Aemond said, his tone growing quieter. "He rode Vagar into battle and was a renowned warrior, but he died young, and Vagar was riderless for a time. After his death, Vagar was claimed by Lady Laena Velaryon," he continued, his voice soft and solemn. "She was a gentle and kind soul, but her life was cut short by a tragic death in childbirth." Aemond nodded slowly, his gaze distant as he continued thinking about the history of Vagar. Yes, he said quietly. After the death of Lady Lena, I claimed Vagar as my own. We bonded instantly, like we were meant to be together all along. Aemond shook his head, his expression turning solemn. No, he said softly. I was the only one of my family without a dragon. But Vagar chose me, and we have had a powerful bond ever since. Aemond nodded, his expression stoic but his eyes holding a hint of sadness. That's right, he said, his tone quiet. I was the only one of my family without a dragon for many years. It was a source of pain for me. I felt incomplete in a way. Aemond shook his head slightly, his expression softening. It's all right, he said, his voice gentle. I have Vagar now, and we are bonded for life. It was worth the wait. Aemond smiled at your sincerity, his usually stern expression softening. They are, he said, his voice filled with admiration. There's nothing quite like the feeling of flying on the back of a dragon, the wind in your hair, the sky all around you, the power and freedom it gives you. It's unlike anything else in the world. Aemond nodded, a knowing look in his eye. Yes, he said, his tone matter-of-fact. Dragons can only be ridden by those of Valyrian blood. It's a unique bond, one that only we can share with these magnificent creatures. Aemond smiled at the thought, his gaze settling on you. Maybe someday I'll take you for a ride on Vagar, he said softly, his tone turning slightly playful. Would you like that? Aemond chuckled at your eagerness, his heart swelling with a feeling he couldn't quite identify. Good, he said, his tone firm but playful. I'll make it a promise. I'll take you for a ride on Vagar, and you'll know what it's like to fly. Aemond smiled back, his eyes still locked on your face. The empty plates lay scattered between you, evidence of the dinner you shared. He leaned back in his chair, eyeing you with a mix of admiration and curiosity. You have such a lovely smile, he said suddenly, his tone soft and almost admiring. Aemond shrugged, his gaze fixed on your face. I'm just being honest, he said, his tone nonchalant. You have a beautiful smile. It lights up your entire face. Aemond nodded, realizing the late hour. He stood up from the table, his tall and muscular frame towering over you. You're right, he said, his tone a little regretful. It is getting late. You should go get some rest. Aemond stopped you before you could grab the dishes. Leave it, he said, his tone firm but not unkind. I'll have one of the male servants take care of it. Aemond shook his head, his gaze fixed on you. You've waited on me all night. It's time for you to go rest. I'll not hear another word about it, he said, his voice firm and a tiny bit amused. Aemond watched as you bowed, his gaze softening as he saw the hesitation in your gesture. You're welcome, he said, his tone almost gentle. Now go on, get some rest. You've worked hard today. Aemond nodded, a small smile on his face. Good, he said, his tone firm. Bring me breakfast, first thing in the morning. Aemond watched as you headed towards the door, his heart strangely fluttering in his chest. Good night, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Aemond watched as you left the room, his eyes lingering on the door as it closed behind you. He stood there for a moment longer, his mind racing with thoughts of you as he tried to make sense of the feelings stirring within him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't want you to leave. He was used to being alone, to being content with solitude. but something about you made him yearn for a connection he couldn't explain. He enjoyed having you around. He didn't see you as just a maid, even though that's what you were. You were a young woman, smart, kind, and beautiful, and he found himself drawn to you in a way he couldn't quite understand. He wasn't used to feeling this way about anyone. He was used to being alone, isolated, and focused on his duties as a prince. But you made him feel something different, something that was both unfamiliar and tantalizing. Aemond instructed his male servant to clean up the room. After the room was tidied, Aemond lay in bed, his thoughts running wild as he tried to sleep. He tossed and turned, unable to find rest. His mind kept returning to you, and to the strange feelings you stirred within him. He couldn't understand why he was so drawn to you, why he couldn't stop thinking about you. It was unlike anything he had ever felt before. He found himself wishing you were still there with him. He was used to being alone, to being comfortable with his own company. But tonight he felt an emptiness he couldn't explain. He couldn't shake the desire to have you there with him, to feel your presence in the room. It was a new and unfamiliar feeling for him, and it was consuming him. Aemond closed his eyes, his mind still filled with thoughts of you. As he drifted into sleep, he found himself in a dream, one that was filled with images of you. In his dream, he saw your face, your smile, your eyes, all of the little details that made you so uniquely attractive to him. He could almost feel your touch, could almost smell your scent. It was as if you were right there with him.